This is the Impressions Xchange podcast.
Impressions Xchange podcast,
where all topics impacting the graphic imaging and printing industry are addressed via in-depth news coverage, analysis, and timely interviews.
Welcome to the Impressions Xchange podcast. March is Women's History Month, and as we wind down another year celebrating women in the printing industry, I asked my colleague and mentor, Denise Gustavson, editorial director of the Printing United Alliance Media Brands, to join me to chat about the Her Imprint podcast and the annual Women's History Month lineup. Every business day in March, Denise interviews a different woman in a leadership position in the printing industry. I ask her the history behind the series, how she finds the guests, and the things she's learned along the way. Denise, thank you so much for joining me today.
It's a pleasure to be here.
So I know a lot of the time now with this new series that you have, you are on the interviewer side of things.
It's very weird to be on this side of the table.
So, and I think we chatted last year maybe about the series that was new, but now you're a couple years in. So I'd love to talk to you about, the whys, the hows, things you've learned. So tell me, how and why did you start the Women's History Month podcast and the Her Imprint podcast in the first place?
So as part, backing up, I've been part of the Women in Print Alliance for several years since its founding. So I'm one of those members. So right now I'm a professional advisor to that group. And in talking with the women when we would meet, the stories that they had were always so interesting. A lot of them, had no reason to be in printing, but yet they were there. Then you have those that, it's a second generation, third generation, fourth generation. It's just always interesting to me about how women are in the industry, especially because the industry very much skews toward men. If you look at our industry, it's, what do they say? Pale, stale, and male, or something like that. It's very,
Yeah.
Unfortunately, that's true.
Mhm.
A lot of the folks in this industry they're men, they're white, and they're older.
Mhm.
So how can we elevate the women's voice? So I originally started as doing podcasts just in March as part of Women's History Month. But I decided I had the bright idea. I said, well, why don't we do this all throughout the year? Why do we just do it in March?
Because women's issues are all year, not just in March.
Yes, it just doesn't stop all of a sudden. So last January, we started the podcast. So we do twice monthly. I have the opportunity to talk with wonderful women. And in March, we do still dedicate the entire month of March for all of the working days to have podcasts with women. So this year we are trying to make sure we get our 22 women in for our March Women's History Month podcast series. So that's kind of a little bit of the background of where it started. But again, it's how can we elevate women's voices to let the industry know, and actually to let women know whether they're just starting out, they're in the middle of their career journey, whether they're not even in the industry, but they're looking, that the printing industry is a wonderful place for women to thrive, to grow, to build a life. And it's can be very rewarding.
And so you mentioned you have 2 you do a month on a regular basis, and then you have 22 in the month of March. How do you find the guests, and how do you not repeat? Like, how are you finding all of these, because like you said, women aren't as prevalent in this industry.
I have a list of about 700 right now.
Wow.
Of women that I have encountered via our events, that have been recommended by other women that I've talked to, that have been part of the Women in Print Alliance, that have been, it actually, they come from everywhere. Sometimes they were part of Printing Impressions. Somebody who's talked to somebody and they use it as a source. I'm like, hey, let me call this person. Let me talk to this person. So honestly, it's however I can get my hands on a name and a contact information. I will. I've actually recently had some PR folks reach out and said, "We have someone that would be perfect for this." So it's kind of nice to actually have people reaching out to me
Mhm.
and saying, "Hey, I can volunteer somebody to be on a guest on your
Mhm.
podcast." So I'm glad that I'm finally getting to that point
Mhm.
too, that people are expecting it, that they are anticipating the new episodes as they're coming out, and actually saying, "Hey, this woman, she is phenomenal. She's a rock star. Let me connect you with her."
Right. And in the description, can we put your email address in case someone listening
Yes,
hears
of
this and
course.
okay, great. So those who are listening, we will include Denise's information so you can get in contact if you have a recommendation or you think that you would like to be on the show. So what are you've spoken with so many different women, different positions, different organizations. What are some of the things that you've learned over the years? Or even, this year in particular?
There's a lot of very similar issues that all women talk about. Um, Imposter syndrome is probably one of the most prevalent. Women trying to gain confidence in their abilities, that a lot of women are afraid to ask questions because they don't want to appear weak or inferior in any way, shape, or form. It's interesting. It's just it's people in C-suites. I mean, they have owned it. They have reached and broken through that glass ceiling. They are owners and in the C-suite of companies, and they still doubt themselves. They still sometimes feel that it's hard for them to walk into boardrooms and be the only one there.
Mhm.
That they are tasked with managing at work, then they have to deal with their home life and their personal life, how they balance that. There's a lot of mom guilt that, women talk about because in some cases, they don't feel like they're 100% anywhere. They're somewhere in the middle. Some days are better than others depending upon the day. Support systems are huge. Allies and sponsors and mentors are also huge. That networking, that support group, professionally and personally, are essential for anybody, I think, men or women, honestly, to succeed.
Mhm.
Um, but then they've overcome things, unfortunately, a lot of women have overcome, bias, intentional or not. In some cases, it was intentional.
Mhm.
And how do they deal that? How do they rise to that occasion and have the confidence in themselves and their abilities to have that very difficult conversation about their abilities or about what they can do? One woman recently, she's like, we were heading to Printing United Alliance, as the expo specifically. And she is the owner of the company, and she had one of her coworkers with her. It was a gentleman. Um, A younger gentleman had not been to the expo before. On the plane, she told him specifically that, "Don't be surprised if people don't talk to me."
Mhm.
He was flabbergasted. "What do you mean? Of course, you're the owner." She's like, "Just
Mhm.
know that this is gonna happen." And she goes, time and time again, she would walk into booths, and they would talk to him
Mhm.
and not talk to her.
Mhm. Yeah.
It's eh and like I said, in some of those cases, it was probably unintentional.
Mhm.
But the most people just fall into those habits,
Mhm.
unfortunately.
Women in Print Alliance is dedicated to connecting, empowering, and advancing women in the print industry. As part of Printing United Alliance, we're fostering a more inclusive future through advocacy, education, and networking opportunities that connect women across the entire industry. Join us as an individual to grow your career, expand your network, and access exclusive resources, or enroll your entire organization to show your commitment to supporting women in print. Become a member today at womeninprintalliance.org and help us shape the future of print.
I can't remember if it was on your podcast or maybe someone that we spoke with at some point, but it was same situation. It was a woman, owner, and she was with like a man who was a salesperson, and they went into a booth and they kept talking to him and not her. Um, and this was maybe a year or two ago. So I think it definitely something that resonates with women out there who have had the same
Mhm.
experiences.
And they're honestly the owners.
Mhm.
One woman, her and her husband run a shop. He is the one that's in the field, he sells, he handles equipment, doesn't handle finances, he doesn't do anything with the buying or purchasing. She handles all of that, but they wanted to talk to him.
Mhm. Mm.
It's it's odd that that mentality sometimes stays around, but then you also look at women and the fact that they couldn't get loans until,
Mhm.
what, 80s
Yeah,
or
70s
something?
or 80s.
70 or 80s, they could not get loans by themselves.
Mhm.
So, have things changed? Yes, things have changed. I don't wanna dwell on the bad things, but it's still that something that women deal with day in and day out.
Mhm.
And in some cases, especially the women in the C-suite, they can make decisions on who they work with,
Mhm.
on what suppliers they use. If they don't like how they're treated, they can take their business elsewhere because their money is just as good as
Mhm.
everybody else's.
Mhm. Yeah. Um, and you mentioned, having peer group or having a group that you can kind of, um, share some of these things with and having a support system. The Women in Print Alliance is
Mhm.
great for that. I think you're on the board or
I'm a professional advisor
okay,
to
advisor.
the group. So I have sat in board meetings, et cetera, to know what's going on and to help assist.
Mhm.
There's a number of us that are part of the staff of Printing United Alliance that are professional advisors to the group as a whole. But
Mhm.
I mean, there's such a strong group now that lead out on, Women in Print Alliance. Elizabeth Lyons Black is our director, and she is pushing for a lot of the different programs and the education to help women. I mean, last year at Expo, it was talking about negotiation and
Mhm.
negotiation skills,
Mhm.
something that women struggle with.
Mhm.
And it's not just in our industry, it's across the board. So, how can women be better advocates for themselves in negotiating or whatever it is, whether it's a new piece of equipment, whether it's for a raise that they want within their job, within their company? There's so many ways that it can be applied.
Mhm. Yeah, I sat in on a webinar last year, and it was specifically about imposter syndrome, which you mentioned. And it was fascinating. They had an expert on imposter syndrome talking to um, the people who were on the webinar, and there was a chat. And in the chat, people were sharing similar stories of experiencing that. Um, so, why do you think it's important? Why do you think it's important that we have, um, the Her Imprint podcast? Why we celebrate women during Women's History Month?
They're an important part of the industry. And honestly, in some cases, nobody else is doing it.
Mm.
Um, they have a lot of women have their own networks. They celebrate each other,
Mhm.
which is phenomenal. I think that's something that we need to happen more regularly. But there's situations that unfortunately men just don't understand. There needs to be a place where women can have a conversation, a real conversation about how their responsibilities in their personal life impact their professional life. How that guilt, that mom guilt that many women have. I mean, granted, I don't have kids, so I don't understand that completely. I mean, I do to a certain
Mhm.
extent, but to be pulled in 2 directions on a constant basis is wearing, and it could lead you to question, "Is this really what I want? Is this what I should be doing?" So, to be able to talk with other women that have been through that, that have dealt with it, that have dealt with their crying, 2-year-old that has a fever, and yet their biggest customer is on the phone asking for, "Why is my job late?" Dealing with 2 things that are equally important. How do you juggle that?
Mhm.
How do you figure that out?
Right.
And I've talked to a couple that are single moms that are doing it on their own. I can't imagine how they are doing that without a support network. And that's why that is so important. And surfacing it too helps, I think, people understand that we all need a certain level of empathy with each other as well. Because we all show up at work, we try to put on as professional a face as we can have. We try to leave our personal stuff at home.
But we're not robots.
Exactly. We are not robots. We have emotion. We have things that are weighing on us. Giving people grace and giving them an empathetic ear if they need it is really important. Man, woman, it does not matter. Um, because honestly, it's going to make for a better workplace. It's going to make for stronger bonds within teams. And then that kind of leads, once your teams at your company are stronger, that leads to stronger companies. Stronger companies lead to stronger communities. Stronger communities lead to a stronger industry as a whole. That's some of the bedrock of what we have. Are we treating our people the way that they should be treated? It's sometimes very basic, you know, treat others with the way you want to be treated. If more people did that, I think it would be a very different world too.
And, one of the things that we talk about all the time is labor challenges.
Mhm.
And, you know, if we address a lot of the issues that women face, there might potentially be an easier time bringing more women into the industry.
Mhm.
'Cause that's, half the population.
Yeah. In some cases, more than half.
Mhm.
And it's interesting. Technology has played a huge role in helping women too. You look at it, 20, 30 years ago, if you were in a commercial offset shop, there were jobs that physically women could not do.
Mhm.
Paper rolls, other things that required a strength and an ability that was beyond most women's muscular, physical strength.
Mhm.
Um, they just couldn't do it. But now that has changed. There's automation with robots, with even just paper lifters. I mean, there are tools that can be used
Right.
that can help to, in some ways, level the playing field to allow women to do something like a pressman's job. He's called a pressman,
Mhm.
a lead press operator.
Yep.
In many cases, they had to be able to do a lot of physical activity. Some women could not do that.
Right.
But now that's not the case these days. Things have changed. The presses have changed. The technology has changed. I mean, if you start looking at digital, there's not a ton of lifting. There's not a ton of some of the very physically intensive things. Is there still some? Yes. But again, it's up to a lot of women as well if they want to try.
Mhm.
One woman, she was funny. She's like, she always wanted to work on the presses. And when she started, they wouldn't hire her because there was no women's changing room.
Oh. Hmm.
There were only like on the press room floor. So when they would have to come and put their press uniform on or whatever their work clothes on, there was no changing rooms for women.
Wow. Not something you think about, you know, right away, but
There was only men's.
Mhm.
So no, there could not be any women on the press room floor because they had nowhere to change
Hmm.
into their work clothes.
Hmm.
That they could get dirty and whatnot and then get laundered, whatever. Different now. Now they could if they wanted to because they've made that adjustment. But it's just one of those things, like, that's how the companies were set up before.
Mhm. And people weren't questioning,
No.
the status quo, questioning how it's always been.
And honestly, society has changed too. In the 50s or 60s when some of these companies may have been established, most women were not in the workforce.
They were home.
They were home. They were raising their kids. But things have changed. Most most families have to have 2 incomes in
Mhm.
order to survive. Just to have a somewhat decent, you know, cost of living, you need those 2 salaries.
Mhm.
So, things have changed, and women are not content with being order takers, with being secretaries, with being looked down on.
Mhm.
There's no reason to.
Mhm.
They're just as intelligent.
Mhm.
They can do just as many things. Why not give them the opportunity?
Mhm. Yeah. Are you planning to continue this moving forward, the
I
series?
I definitely am.
Okay. Good.
Like I said, right now I have a list of like 700 people that are on that list,
Wow. Mhm.
and I'm looking for more
Mhm.
because not everybody's always available. Some people just don't reach out because in many cases I cold call.
Mhm.
So it's coming out of the blue.
Right.
So what is this crazy woman? What does she want? Why is she reaching out to me? Um, So it's hard in some cases to get people to spend a little bit of time to have a conversation. And that's really what I want it to be. It's a 30-minute conversation
Mm.
about how you started in the industry. What's your view of success?
Mhm.
What challenges are you facing? How have you overcome it? And what advice are you looking to give to the next generation that's coming in?
Where can listeners find the series?
So the series is part of the PI Exchange. So you can find it on piworld.com. Um, you can also find it in the PI World newsletter. So Bring Impressions Top. And you can also find it via the Women in Print Alliance because it is presented by and sponsored by the Women in Print Alliance. So it comes out via their newsletter. So this month they have a lot
Mhm.
that they're working with. Follow me on LinkedIn. I am posting as soon as the episode is live. You'll see them there as well via social. And wherever you get your favorite other podcasts, you can find them there as well.
Perfect. Well, Denise, thank you so much. I appreciate you joining me.
Thanks, Ashley, for having me. I appreciate it.
I want to thank Denise for joining me on today's podcast. And of course, I want to thank all of you, our listeners. I will link to the podcast series in the description, and I will include a link to the Women in Print Alliance. Stay tuned for the next episode of the Impressions Exchange podcast.